What if everything you thought you knew about why Harry and Meghan left the royal family was a carefully constructed story, designed to hide a much darker truth? We've all learned the official narrative by heart. The relentless, racially-tinged media attacks, the crushing weight on their mental health, a cold, unfeeling institution dismissively referred to as the firm, a bitter and explosive feud between two once-inseparable brothers. These are the reasons we've been given, the pillars of the Megxit saga. But what if I told you that according to a bombshell new biography, the final unrecoverable break, the point of no return, wasn't caused by any of that? What if the action that made their royal life impossible wasn't just a slow burn of passive neglect, but a single, calculated, and cold-blooded act of betrayal? An act designed not just to sideline Prince Harry, but to permanently sabotage his entire future. A new book, The Gilded Cage, by the renowned and deeply sourced royal biographer Alistair Finch, has just been detailed in a shocking New York Post exclusive, and it claims to have the real story. And this story is bigger than a family argument. It's about the deliberate, strategic destruction of a dream. Stay with me, because we are about to unpack the one event, the one secret document that truly forced the Sussexes to flee. This is the story of Project Commonwealth and the plot that killed it. All right, let's break this down properly. For years, the world has been captivated by a consistent and powerful story about the why of Megxit. It's a narrative that, for the most part, the Sussexes themselves have masterfully controlled. In their groundbreaking interview with Oprah, their multi-part Netflix docuseries, and Harry's astonishingly candid memoir, Spare, they painted a vivid picture of an unbearable, suffocating existence. They spoke of Meghan's harrowing suicidal thoughts being met not with compassion, but with cold, institutional protocol. They meticulously detailed the relentless, racially charged attacks from the British tabloids, a daily onslaught that they felt the palace not only failed to stop, but at times, implicitly enabled. Harry gave us a front-row seat to the painful disintegration of his relationship with his brother, Prince William, and depicted his father, now King Charles, as a man emotionally hamstrung, forever beholden to the very institution that was inflicting so much pain on his own son. This narrative is compelling. It's deeply emotional. And for their millions of supporters around the world, it has been accepted as the definitive truth. It frames their departure as a desperate act of self-preservation, a dramatic escape from a toxic and archaic environment to protect their young family and their own sanity. And let's be absolutely clear. There is little doubt that all of those elements were painfully real for them. The press coverage was savage. The institutional indifference was palpable. The strains on their mental health were evident and serious. But Alistair Finch's new book, The Gilded Cage, makes a radical argument. It posits that these were all just symptoms, not the underlying disease. They were the fuel, but not the spark that lit the final explosive fire that severed their royal life forever. Finch, a veteran journalist who has spent 3 decades cultivating sources deep inside the palace walls, claims that the public narrative, while emotionally true, conveniently omits the single most important catalyst. He calls it the point of no return. And it wasn't a cruel headline or a petty argument over a wedding tiara. It was the deliberate, professional sabotage of Prince Harry's entire life's work. To understand the gravity of this claim, we need to rewind. We have to look at Harry's identity before Meghan. For his entire adult life, Prince Harry was a man in search of a purpose. He felt adrift, the spare to the heir, haunted by the tragic loss of his mother and uncomfortable with the gilded cage of his birth. He found a temporary anchor in the army, a place where he wasn't a prince but simply Captain Wales. The army gave him a sense of belonging, of merit, and of value that he had craved his entire life. When his military career ended, that search for purpose led him to 2 core passions: his unwavering support for wounded veterans, which culminated in the phenomenally successful Invictus Games, and his deep, profound connection to Africa. This wasn't just a royal duty for him. It was a spiritual calling, a legacy inherited from his mother, Diana, who had also found solace and purpose on the continent. This lifelong work led to his appointment by his grandmother, the Queen, as the Commonwealth Youth Ambassador in 2018. This was not just another ceremonial title. According to Finch's book, this was intended to be the cornerstone of Harry's entire royal career. He, along with his new, charismatic, biracial American wife, were the perfect modern duo to re-energize the Commonwealth for a new generation. They embodied a future that was diverse, global, and progressive. This is where Project Commonwealth comes in. Finch alleges that in the turbulent final months of 2019, as the institutional and media pressures were reaching a fever pitch, Harry and Meghan didn't just impulsively decide to step back. That was the simplistic headline that was fed to the world. What they actually did was invest immense time and effort into preparing a formal, detailed, professional proposal for a new way of working within the monarchy. Project Commonwealth was a comprehensive plan, reportedly dozens of pages long, outlining a visionary path forward. The plan proposed that they would become roving ambassadors for the crown. They would be based part-time in a major Commonwealth country. Finch suggests both Canada and South Africa were seriously considered, and part-time in the UK. Crucially, they proposed to become financially independent through their own commercial endeavors, thereby relieving the burden on the British taxpayer, while dedicating the majority of their time to representing the Queen and championing Commonwealth causes. In their minds, it was the perfect hybrid solution. It surgically removed them from the toxic daily warfare with the London-based British press. It granted them a degree of autonomy and the ability to earn their own money, freeing them from the control of the sovereign grant. But most importantly, it gave Harry a meaningful, defined, and substantial role that he could build for the rest of his life. It was his roadmap to purpose, a way to serve the institution he was born into, but on terms that were sustainable. This document, Finch claims, was the centerpiece of a top-secret meeting at Sandringham in early January 2020, and it was flatly, unequivocally rejected. But the rejection, as brutal and disheartening as it was, is not the betrayal. The betrayal is what happened next. It's the hidden chapter of this story. According to Finch's sources, he cites 2 separate high-level palace aides and a former staffer in Harry's own office. The Project Commonwealth proposal was not just rejected, it was leaked. Let that sink in for a moment. A private, sensitive, detailed plan. A document that contained not just logistics, but Prince Harry's deepest professional ambitions and his vision for his future, was handed over to the very press establishment he was desperately trying to escape. Within days, the media narrative was set ablaze. The headlines that appeared bore no resemblance to the proposal's actual intent. It was a masterclass in distortion. The stories didn't depict a prince trying to find an innovative way to serve the crown. Instead, they painted Harry and Meghan as greedy, entitled, petulant royals who wanted to have their cake and eat it too. The narrative, repeated ad nauseum, became, they want the perks of royalty without any of the duty. They want to cash in on their titles while living in luxury abroad. Their proposal to be financially independent was spun as a greedy, Hollywood-style money grab. Their desire to live abroad part-time was spun as a contemptuous rejection of Britain. Their entire, carefully constructed plan for a lifetime of service was twisted into a weapon and used to assassinate their character. Finch's book asserts, without ambiguity, that this was no accident. This was not a clumsy mistake or a rogue staffer seeking a payday. It was a calculated, strategic leak designed to achieve one thing: to destroy the viability of Project Commonwealth in the court of public opinion before it could ever be seriously debated. It was designed to turn the British public and the world against them, to corner them, and to leave them with absolutely no choice but to detonate the so-called nuclear option of leaving entirely. The question is, who would do that? Who would betray Harry on such a personal, professional, and devastating level? Finch's book stops short of naming a single person, but the implication is chilling and hangs heavy over every page. He suggests it wasn't a low-level staffer. A leak of this magnitude, this strategically damaging, had to be sanctioned, or at the very least quietly approved from the very top of the royal hierarchy. The book points to a powerful old guard of senior courtiers, men fiercely loyal to the rigid hierarchy of the direct line of succession: Charles, and most importantly, William. These courtiers, Finch argues, saw Harry's soaring global popularity, amplified by Meghan, not as an asset, but as a dangerous threat to the future king. To them, Project Commonwealth wasn't a modern solution, it was the blueprint for a competing court. It was the establishment of a Sussex royal brand that could, in their eyes, overshadow the main event. By leaking and twisting the proposal, they could neutralize this perceived threat. They could ensure there was only one show in town, the one run by the future King William and Queen Catherine. This, according to the Gilded Cage, was the final, unforgivable betrayal. It wasn't just the family turning a blind eye to Meghan's pleas for help. It was, in Harry's eyes, his own family, or at the very least, the powerful institution they command, actively sabotaging his future and his very identity. It was definitive proof that there was no place for him, no trust, and no viable path forward within the ancient walls of the monarchy. The dream wasn't just dead, it had been assassinated. So let's examine the evidence Finch presents. He re-examines the timeline of that fateful January in forensic detail. The now famous Sandringham Summit took place on January 13, 2020, but Finch focuses on the critical week before that. Harry, having returned to the UK ahead of Meghan, had tried to secure a meeting with his grandmother, the Queen, to discuss his proposal privately. He was repeatedly told she was unavailable. The palace machine was stonewalling him. During this time, with their private channels blocked and whispers of a negative story about to break, they made a defensive move. The Sussex Royal website went live, outlining their desire for a new working model. They were forced to go public because, Finch argues, their private proposal was already being leaked and misrepresented behind the scenes. They weren't launching an attack. They were trying to get ahead of a story that was being written for them. They failed. The press narrative, fueled by the leak, was already set. Finch also quotes an anonymous source from inside the Sussex's former communications team, a person who witnessed the fallout firsthand. The source says, "The mood shifted overnight. Before the leak, the focus was on negotiation, finding a compromise, a third way. After the leak, it was about survival. The trust was incinerated. It was a declaration of war. Harry felt, and I quote directly, the ground had been pulled from under him. He realized they weren't negotiating his future, they were negotiating his exit." This new context changes the entire meaning of the Oprah interview, doesn't it? When Meghan says she was silenced, and Harry talks about being trapped, this new information suggests they weren't just talking about passive neglect or institutional apathy. They were talking about active, deliberate sabotage. It explains the depth of the anger and hurt that was so palpable in that interview. It wasn't just about hurt feelings over family squabbles. It was about a fundamental professional betrayal that made any kind of working relationship utterly impossible. So what does this mean for the royal family now? If Finch's theory is true, and he presents a compelling case, it paints a much darker, more ruthless picture of the modern monarchy than even the Sussexes have dared to spell out explicitly. It suggests an institution so pathologically obsessed with control and the primogeniture-based hierarchy that it would rather brutally cast out a popular senior prince than allow him to innovate or operate with any shred of autonomy. It suggests that the devastating rift between William and Harry isn't just a personal spat between two grieving brothers. It's a deep, ideological chasm about the very soul and future of the monarchy. William represents continuity, tradition, and the unwavering principle of the institution above all else. It's a path of duty defined by constraint. Harry, with Meghan by his side, represented a chance for something radically different, a more flexible, emotionally open, and globally minded monarchy. And the institution, in a final, ruthless act of self-preservation, chose continuity and brutally crushed the innovation. The Gilded Cage essentially argues that Harry and Meghan didn't just quit. They were pushed out by a strategic checkmate they never saw coming. They came to a negotiation with a peace treaty, only to find their opponents had already declared war and were using their own plans as ammunition against them.